Thank you. Thank you very much. The ancient Haitians said honor and respect whenever they entered a space. So I say honor and respect to those who invited me, the island of Dominica and this reparations committee, Dr. Dublin and Lloyd, everyone who put this together. Thank you so very much for thinking of Haiti. Today is a very important day for us, and I've been working most of the day with respect to presentations and on the ground with our youth. We run the Free Haiti movement. It's a resistance movement against the current humanitarian front occupation in Haiti. And today is the 217th anniversary of the Battle of Vertieres, which occurred on November 18th, 1803. I invite those who are interested in specifics to go to the Free Haiti Movement page on Facebook, to go to my YouTube channel. There is more detailed, which I'm not going to cover today, about when the battle started, what happened, and how all of the triumph occurred. So you will learn about the big general Capois la Mort. If you go to, you can go to Èzili Dantò on Facebook. I've itemized a list of the videos because we've been teaching for the last 16 years since 2004, which was our bicentennial, 6 teaching per year, and the Battle of Vertieres is one of them. So I invite you to go see some of Professor Scobie's video. I have a essay called Until She Spoke. Those who want to know more beyond what I'm going to say today, you can go to èziliDantò.com and see the essay Until She Spoke. You will find videos from Professor Bayena Bello, who's a well-renowned Haitian historian, and she will give you more details about what the significance of this new empire was intended to be. And you'll see some more information. For today, I'm going to cover in the next 30 minutes that I have this topic that I've been giving, the Battle of Vertieres, its significance in the liberation struggle of the African and in the liberation struggle of the Caribbean and Africa. To do that, I'd like to make 3 points. One is that the Haitian Revolution teaches lessons that we have not learned. And I'd like to highlight the lessons that it has taught that we as a people have not learned. So we're still enslaved all over in the Caribbean, with the 15 nations in the Caribbean and the 53 nations of the African Union. I'm going to also cover the Haitian Revolution was a triumph, and it occurred at Vertieres, which was the defining battle after a 13-year war. It was the defining battle, and it illustrated something critically important. Obviously, our humanity. All over the Caribbean, Africans were enslaved, and the indigenous Blacks that were found in the Americas before Columbus got here in 1492 were also enslaved, and their history was conflated with the Mongolian folks that had came as a wave before Columbus. We're going to talk just a little bit about this triumph and how it illustrates our humanity and our ability and potential for permanently outwit and beat the ruling white system of profit over people. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And finally, in order to illustrate the significance of the Battle of Vertieres, I've chosen a few people of Caribbean heritage, a few revolutionaries in the Caribbean and Africa, And we will talk about those. Let's start with the easiest part, which is that Haiti and the Battle of Vertieres showed us that this idea that one race, the white race, was superior to the so-called Black race, the phenotype African people, was forever destroyed at Vertieres. Because at Vertieres, Capois-Lamor, the general under Haiti's founding father, General Janjak Desalin, there were 3 generals there fighting in the north. We had been fighting since August 14th. It began with Bois-Caïma. And I have all of this because every year we do Bois-Caïma, which starts on August 14th, and then we do Desalin's word, and then this is our 3rd teaching that we do all month about Vertieres. So this battle, the triumph of this battle allowed for white society and those who make up our narrative to come up with all kinds of spins, because all of a sudden people who were allegedly, for instance, in the United States, taught to be not even human, who were breeded like animals, who were taught to be property, beat 3 European empires in combat. We beat the French, the Spanish, the English, and then Vertieres, Napoleon's armies, the French again. And that forever, this is what Desalin said on November 29th. I have the Declaration of Independence that was signed by the 3 of the generals that fought at the Battle of Vertieres on November 18th, 1803, Clervaux, Christophe, and Desalin. They signed in the north, a place today still called Fort Liberté because of the liberty that they signed on November 29th. So the Battle of Vertieres was November 18, 1803. And they signed this on November 29th. And in signing this Declaration of Independence, Desalin said that he was avenging the entire Americas. I have avenged America, he declared. And if you can see at all, this photo I have, it is General Rochambeau. He was the most diabolic serial killer of the army of the French. And he, including the brother-in-law of Napoleon, they came to re-enslave us. And Leclerc said something very important. He said, we must exterminate every African that's on this island that ever wore an epaulette, like a soldier's uniform, all the way down to the children 14 or older. This was what they came to do. And this was what our ancestors on November 18th stopped. And we stood alone. There was no alliance. There was no African Union. There was no solidarity. We stood alone. I have a poem by a member of our network, Michel Sinon, that I send out every year. It's at the top of my Èzili Dantò page. It's called Haiti the Rebel. And it says that we were we face hell and we stepped on its head to create our own history. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about, as I said before, is the lessons. and there are lessons that occurred. So let's understand who was at Vertieres. The president, no, let's say the affranchi, the free black, who would become president of Haiti after the assassination of Janjak Desalin, was not at Vertieres. It's very important to understand that. Remember, the diaspora today, just like back then, came with the United Nations of forces that Napoleon had conquered and brought with him and conscripted to come and re-enslave the Haitians. This is happening again. History repeats itself, but because we don't know our history, we are constantly, as Janjak Desalin said, if you all look in there was a second Declaration of Independence, which is the more popular. It was on January 1st, 1804. And on that, he made the mistake of having the affranchis, the generals that were fighting on the side of Napoleon. They signed. They would then, and 2 years later, betray the unity of the masses and take over Haiti. That was the first coup d'etat, is the assassination 2 years after 1804 on October 17th, 1806. And that assassination was the betrayal of the Haitian Revolution by the mulatto sons of France and those assimilated folks who were just about personal power. These examples are in our faces today, everywhere. And so we must really, really look at those factors if we are calling ourselves revolutionaries. And I'm going to mention some revolutionaries who do look at all of these factors. Now, as I said, the Haitian Revolution stopped a barbaric trade. It stopped what they call the transatlantic trade and sometimes the triangulate trade, which went from kidnapping Africans in West Africa all the way down to Angola, and then enslaving them in the Americas and taking the sugar and the fruits of their labor to enrich Europe, and then taking that ship back to do the same thing all over again. For those who want to know the specifics, the Battle of Vertieres and the Haitian Revolution revenged and made human an entire race, because an entire race of people was deemed by the Europeans to be subhuman. And when we did that, we stopped forced assimilation. That's taking my grandmother, my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, and forcing them to have children that will be sold as property, or raping the Black woman ad nauseum so that she can have a child to be sold into slavery. So we stopped that. We stopped forced assimilation. We stopped direct colonialism. We stopped and abolished the slave trade and slavery. Those were the triumph. And down the annals of time, since this date, and then 1804, when Haiti became a nation, this feat has inspired revolution the world over. The world over. From the Chinese to Haile Selassie, to the Greeks, to South America, where Haitian soldiers went and fought and liberated 5 Latin American countries, to tons of events that happened in Jamaica and all of the various islands. We don't have enough time to go into all of that, but suffice it to say that this great feat was looked upon by every Black person who was enslaved with great pride. And many, many attempted to get to Haiti because Janjak Desalin said, if you were enslaved anywhere, this land is a land of freedom. This is the empire of freedom. All you have to do as a Black person is get here, put your foot on this land, and you are free and a citizen. He also said, and this is obviously proving our humanity, because we have had 300 years of barbaric European slavery, 300 years since 1503 when the Africans were first brought in. Instead of having revenge for the white folks, essentially, Desalin said, if you are white and you are facing tyranny, this land is a land of liberty. If you manage to get here, you will be free. You can't own land because this space was only for Black people to own land. This is very important because all around there was no place in the Western Hemisphere where a Black man could give testimony against a white man. And so it was a small piece of land, and we had 250,000 people to take care of after the revolution, and we were facing all the white tribes. But we said, you can be free here until we'll give you asylum. So that was the humanity of the greatest hero who ever lived, our founding father, Janjak Desalin. Those who want to understand, I think it's Eric Williams. He's written tremendously. You can go ahead and get some of his books about Caribbean history. Of course, in terms of Haiti, we have C.L.R. James, who writes The Black Jacobins with regards to Toussaint Louverture. But here at Free Haiti Movement, we tell everyone that our founding father is not Toussaint Louverture. It is not Henri Christophe and Boyer. It is the one and only Janjak Desalin. And Janjak Desalin's ideas are engraved in his 1805 Constitution before he was assassinated by the Mulatto Sons of France and other conspirators. So you have that as a resource to see what was the vision of a Black free man before that vision was squashed. And we at Free Haiti Movement, the movement that I lead, are here to lift up the ideals of Janjak Desalin. He wanted a Black-ruled independent nation, whereas today, the template that is everywhere in the Caribbean and in Africa is Black-ruled colony, which was what Toussaint Louverture thought he could get under all the circumstances. And he thought that he could be Governor General and that he would be the first of the Blacks to Napoleon's first of the whites. Well, that so unnerved and made Napoleon mad. He sent a whole armada. And that armada, there were 50,000 soldiers that he sent. 20,000 went to New Orleans, which is what the Louisiana territory that the Napoleon had out there, the French had in what's now called the United States. And then 30,000 first came, and they thought that they could just quickly get rid of these upstarts my ancestors. And I'll tell you some of a little bit. Napoleon's brother-in-law, General Leclerc, was so confident that he had brought the cream of the crop of soldiers to squash and commit genocide against the barefoot Haitians enslaved folks, that he brought his wife. She brought all her pretty dresses, and they were going to have lots of parties after it was over. But then they met Coupe-tête Boulekai, which was cut off their heads and burned the property. Lesson of the Haitian Revolution. When they saw that first 30,000 troops in the waters of North Haiti, they could see a sea of cannons and boats and so on. And Christophe, they had been liberated since 1794. They were fighting, and there was a lot of strategy going on. And this is one of the things we don't do, is strategize against and divide the European powers. But our ancestors did, right? So that when the revolution started in 1791, the European powers were fighting for territory and the Americas, and they were fighting in Europe. So the other side of the island was owned by Spain. Today it's Dominican Republic, but at that time, Dominican Republic didn't exist. It was Spanish Saint-Domingue, and they were fighting each other. So Toussaint Desalin joined with the Spanish, who wanted to get rid of the French. And then when they had gotten what they needed to get out of there, then they joined the French to get rid of the British. And then they just kept doing that until we got our freedom. Today, we don't do any of that. We just think that we can go into their government system, the non-for-profit system, and somehow by voting, we're going to get civil rights. I want to get to that very quickly. So the first thing to understand is the nature of this triumph. And let me situate it for you in a historical matter. In Africa, there were over 1,000 years of Arab enslavement, where they were raping the Black women constantly and putting them in their harem and castrating the Black males and putting them in slave armies, going on for 1,000 years. The West Africans and the warriors of West Africa were fighting that. And then came the Europeans, and they started fighting this. There were women warriors. I'm not going into all of those, but you can find it on Until She Wrote, or any of my when I talk about Bois-Caïman, we talk about the significance of that Vodun ceremony and the priestess that started it and so forth, and all the archetypes. And the reason why we were able to do Vertieres was because of our connection to ancestor. So 1,200 years almost, and then 1492 comes along, 1503, and you have 300 years of barbaric slavery in the Western Hemisphere, and Vertieres cuts that. But the European came back, and the way they came back is very important. I'm going to give you some numbers, very important. So at the start of the Haitian Revolution, there was about 500,000 enslaved Africans. Remember that, 500,000 enslaved Africans. There was about 40,000 white colonists, those are plantation owners. And then there were this other class of people. And it is this other class of people that is always betraying us. And to this day, we still don't seem to get that lesson of the Haitian Revolution. And I hope that today I am clear about that class of people. And that is the mixed race and property class. There were in Haiti about some historians say there was, let's say 28,000. Okay, let's round it off and say 30,000 mixed race and affranchis, right? Free Black men who owned property, and some owned slaves. They were free. Okay, so three types of people were on this island: the enslaved Africans that were doing all the work and were treated like beasts, right? Then you have the colonists. There's 40,000 of them, white folks, right? A lot of them were absentee ownership, but yes. And then you have this other class, which is the mixed race colored people. I want you to understand that this significance of this is overlooked by most historians. But this is what continually happens today. The masses of Black people are always confused by their children, because the mixed race people were descendant of Black women and Black males, but they were assimilated into the system. So in 1789, there are two big revolutions right next to the Haitian Revolution, right? Haitian Revolution started in 1791. Before that, you had the American Revolution, 1776. Everybody knows that. And then the French Revolution, okay? Only one was really a revolution. The others were not revolutions. I'm going to be very quick and say the American Revolution was a switching. It was a slaveholders fighting other slaveholders to maintain property that they took from the indigenous people. That's what it was, right? So the United States was created by slaveholders, and those slaveholders fought Britain to take away the 13 colonies, but they maintained slavery. And to this day, the United States maintains slavery under the 13th Amendment of the US Constitution for certain segments of people in the United States. So not a real revolution, switching of elite. A French Revolution, they talked a lot of égalité and fraternité and all of that. But what they really wanted to do was to get rid of the monarchy. And they chopped heads and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, this is what Haiti tells you what France was about, right? In 1790, right before 1791, there was an affranchi. For purposes of making it very clear, this class I was telling you of men of color, let's call them free Blacks, right? And they were made up mostly of mixed race mulattoes, but there were also some phenotype Black people, a few, right? Just like we have a few assimilated Negroes right now in office at high places that are as dark as you and me. All right, so these men of color and women, a few, owned slaves themselves, and one in particular, Vincent Oge, and this is important because this goes to that first point I made about the lessons of the Haitian Revolution. So you look at these three groups of people, and then in 1791, the 1789 French Revolution is going on. They're chopping down their monarchy. They're having all kinds of a guillotine bloodbath going on over there in France, right? And as they do that, a Haitian freeman was very rich, and he was there on business. And he said, oh, well, because I am mixed in Haiti, I don't have any civil rights. This is familiar, right? So he wanted civil rights for the mulattoes and the property class Black folks, right? Today, that's what we're doing. Civil rights, we're going to the government of enslavers and asking them for civil rights. That so made the governor, and he got it because of because there was the National Assembly and there was a lot of upheaval in the writing of the National Assembly in France. They said that something that included that if you had property, then you had civil rights. And so that was interpreted by Oge, Vincent Oge, as a victory for the mulattoes. This had nothing to do, he had slaves. He wasn't going to give up his money bags. He came back to Haiti, and when he tried to tell that to the white folks, they just looked at him like he was stark raving mad, and he was chopped off his head. However, in 1791, months later, when the Africans, those 500,000 Black folks who had been resisting since the very beginning, okay? So when you read history, or when people tell you, or when the white liberals tell you that it was because of the ideals of the Haitian Revolution and some abolitionist, progressive white person, and that's why somehow Black folks suddenly decided they were not beast. Untrue. I have to give honor and respect, because since they were captured, the Africans, whether they were brought to Trinidad, Jamaica, Dominica, St. Martin, they have been fighting hard. Some even jumped into the ocean before they would be enslaved, and refused to have children, and committed infanticide before they would bring their children into this barbaric system. So from the very beginning, from 1492, remember that Haiti was the first place that rapist pedophile called Christopher Columbus put his first colony, Fort Navidad, and it was a Kawanabo. They call them Taínos, and Queen Anacahona, who fought back. So since the beginning, right there, we have been fighting back. We fight from the ship to the time we get there. And so there were many, many, many all around the Caribbean. I won't go to all of them. You guys have heard of Palmares in Zumbi and Brazil in the 1600s. This is before the Haitian Revolution. Padre Jean in Haiti, before the Haitian Revolution. Francois Magandal and his wife, Grande Brigitte, 1757, before the Haitian Revolution. And the resistance, they always downplay these resistance and call them rebellion. These are armed resistance that I'm talking about. And so lots of maroon colonies. You had Queen Nanny, and after the Haitian Revolution, they say in the United States alone, you had between 250 to 310 revolts, right? But this story is not told. Just like some of you have never heard of Èzili Dantò, the ÉziliNetwork, and how we fight daily to get rid of the current enslavement in Haiti. So when you had these three groups of people, this is how they betray. And I'm focusing on this so that you can see it in your own system, wherever you are, in Dominica, in Jamaica, in Trinidad, in Grenada, wherever you are, in the Bahamas. It's the same system. They bring in the mixed race people, whether it's coming through Leclerc's ship, or it's coming through regular immigration today, right? After after the Haitian Revolution, this theme that I have, Battle of Vertieres, significance in the liberation and struggle of in Africa, for instance, right? The Southern slave owners in America were so scared, right? You now have you have two countries that were created because of the Haitian Revolution, Liberia, right? Because they were so scared. They were sending Black folks to go back to Africa and to found new countries and treat the indigenous the way that the white folks treat the indigenous. So Liberia is a direct dream of like Southern planters and so forth, Sierra Leone, these places. So the Haitian Revolution had the effect of uniting the white tribes, right? Unfortunately, the Haitian Revolution also doubled the size of the United States, which means it doubled the number of slavery that was there. These things we have to see, we have to acknowledge, and we have to understand, so that the next time we take our liberty, and we will, Guinée posée, I always say that, right? Because Desalin knew he was going to win. Like, by the time Vertieres came, he had such spiritual connection to the ancestors, he just sat down and just sent his generals out and had his snuff box at Vertieres. This is a guy who at Crête-à-Pierrot. Now, this is another battle before the Haitian Revolution, and I'm only mentioning it because the mulatto sons of France, that group of 28 to 30,000 mixed race folks, many were on that armada. And one of the biggest fights that Desalin had was at Crête-à-Pierrot. There's a great woman warrior there. Her name is Marie-Jeanne. And they were in this fort, outnumbered. And Alexandre Pétion was behind those cannons, killing Africans. He would become the first president of Haiti after they destroyed Janjak Desalin, and neocolonialism would be instituted. So we have to remember the role of this class, because this class believes this. They believe Sonthonax. For me, I connect people to Bill Clinton when I want to tell you who Sonthonax was. When the Haitian in 1791 began their revolution, the European tribes were so engaged in the fight with each other. Once they realized that the Africans were revolting, it scared the hell out of France, because remember, I may not have mentioned it, but the colony of Haiti was the wealthiest colony in the world. It produced like 40 to 60% of the sugar that was being consumed in Europe. And it provided France with more profits than all 13 of the British colonies that became the United States. That's how big it was. So imagine 1791 comes along, Oge, who was looking for just civil rights, is killed for that. Rise up the Africans, and they want total liberation. They're not just asking to vote and leave slavery, because that's what Vincent Oge, the mulatto, wanted. He wanted to leave slavery. He owned slaves. He just wanted to sit around in the White House of the white folks and have the right to vote for their system. But when the Africans rose up to continue their liberation struggle, the National Assembly, the France sent a man named Sonthonax with about 7,000 troops to squash the African warriors. When he got to Haiti, he said to the mulattoes, in order to get them on his side, the 40,000 free men, let's call them free men instead of just mulattoes, because they consisted of more than mixed race. They were propertied Black folks. Okay. And so he convinced them to come to his side. And so you have this fight where the mulattoes, the whites, and Europe's forces are going after the Africans. This continues to happen because once the Africans win, we look at the mixed race and we say, okay, this is what Desalin did. During the fight for liberation, when he was winning, doing Vertieres, the mulatto sons of France, the two big generals, they did not fight at Vertieres for African freedom. They were in the South somewhere, sitting it out while Desalin fought. And then once they won, then they came as part of the winning side. This constantly happens, people. And we keep forgetting the lessons of the Haitian Revolution. And so,
Ms. Dantò, just we have about 15 more minutes to the end of the program, and we would like to allow some time for questions if anybody has questions. So can we ask you to just round up?
Yep, let me just wrap it up. Okay, so a few of the revolutionaries who were influenced by the Haitian Revolution: Kwame Ture, born in Trinidad, a great civil rights movement. He helped with the development of the Black Power movement. He was leader of SNCC, and All People's African Party. He pushed forward Pan-Africanism. I suggest all of you look at his. He has a very important essay called "The Pitfalls of Liberalism" that touches on what I'm talking about right now. Marcus Garvey, of course, influenced by the Haitian Revolution. Marcus Garvey flag, red and black. That was Desalin's flag. He added the green. We have Haile Selassie. Haiti sent troops and money to help him not get colonized. And he said, I'm going to end on this. He said, you might want to read Emperor Haile Selassie's iconic 1963 speech. And it inspired Bob Marley of Jamaica's song "War." As long as one race believes it's more superior than another, then it's war. And this is what Desalin said. And finally, let's see. I think I did all. Marcus Garvey, Haile Selassie, Kwame Ture, Malcolm X. Of course, his mother was from, I believe, Grenada. And of course, Nat Turner and all of those revolutions that came after, but Nat Turner's mother was Haitian. So these are some of the lessons and the triumph of the Haitian Revolution. I thank you very much for allowing me to share the information with you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dantò. We just had another awe-inspiring and emotional presentation on the significance of the Battle of Vertieres and the Haitian Revolution. I think something that stuck with me is when you mentioned that the Haitian Revolution stopped a barbaric trade, revenged, and made human an entire race. Very, very strong revelation. So again, I would just like to open up for questions if any of our listeners or our viewers have any questions for Ms. Dantò or for Mr. Omar. This is the time.
Yes.
To
yes, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, and if you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing. You can go ahead. Go ahead.
Mari. I would just like Miss, the last presenter there, to expound a little bit more on the importance of the voodoo ceremony at Wakaima in the success of the Haitian Revolution. Because I think somebody mentioned earlier in the evening's proceedings that until you clear your mind of mental slavery, you shall never be free. She would just say something about the ceremony at Wakaima and its importance for the success of the revolution. Thank you.
Ms. Dantò, can you respond to that very briefly,
Yes,
please?
yes. Obviously, my name is Èzili Dantò, and the archetype, the spiritual mother, which helped start the Haitian Revolution, was Èzili Dantò. You can find 3 webinars I did in just this last August 14th for the August month on Wakaima. Obviously, death is not what the European makes it. The African, the voodooist, believes that death is, we are eternal people. Death is a transition back to ZiliDlo, the space of ultimate potentiality, the cosmic womb. And in order, the most important thing about living is how you live. And do you raise up the energies of good, which is what Vodun means, lifting up sacred energies. And so it was understanding that you can use everything that you are since the beginning of time, depuis les marasas, les morts, et les mystères, as your tool and everything that you do, and not look at the graven images. And so Vodun is essential to facing the powers and principalities that Haitian and all Black people face, because it is powers and principality that feeds off of our fear and our adrenaline rush of grief. They feed off of that. And voodooists understood that, and a voodooist priest or priestess is a master of spirit. This is nothing to do with European Abrahamic religions. We are masters, let that sink in, of spirit, which means we also have the ability, for instance, remember, our history is not written. People talk about the great civilizations of Egypt, the Black pharaohs and so forth. Not many, but we do teach it at Free Haiti Movement, that Africans are original to planet Earth, that we are a galactical people, that in this space there were Black folks, that they traveled back and forth to Egypt. There are artworks in the Americas that are in the same manner of the Egyptian artwork. There are drugs found and mummies and cocaine that are only in the Americas. So we know this. And we see all of the edifices like the pyramids and these amazing, very heavy objects. Haitians were able to tap into those knowledge, and they went into battle saying, bullets are dust. At Vertieres, it was forward, forward, forward. Bullets are dust. And they were able to materialize and bring that into application and move very heavy cannons and very heavy, heavy powers away from them.
Very interesting. We may have time for just one more question before we bring our discussion to a close.
All right, Mr. Pascal has his hand up, so he can go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Èzili Dantò, for your presentation. a wonderful, enlightening presentation, and I'm so glad. At one time, when your name was called to deliver shortly after the minister and we did not see you, I knew you were a busy lady, but it frightened me a bit that I had attempted something and it was not working. So I'm so glad. I feel like a kid who just got his Christmas candies, and I'm so happy that you have joined us tonight and delivered this wonderful, enlightening, in-depth presentation on the struggle. I wanted to let yourself and the audience know that I have been following you since 2004. That is around the time when President Father Jean-Bertrand Aristide was taken from his home at night, taken to the airport and flown across the Atlantic to the Central African Republic to remove him from power because he had demanded for reparations from France, the reparations that France had owed to Haiti. And I also know that he was very much supported by Fidel Castro in that call. At that time, CARICOM was not even ready for asking for reparations. CARICOM did that way back in 2013. I also remember what happened in 2010 when you came out and enlightened the world about the events after the earthquake in Haiti and the injustices that has been done to Haiti by the United Nations. And, you know, all of us are members of the United Nations, Dominica, the Caribbean, CARICOM. But I think, and I would like your comment on that, at the floor of the United Nations during the General Assemblies that is held every year, I don't think that we are getting sufficient solidarity and support from CARICOM to Haiti as a member of CARICOM in making demands, first of all, for United Nations to pay for the cholera that they allowed their troops to put there and all of the atrocities that these troops had all done with children, with the whole thing. I would just want to wrap up by saying, I remember very well when the earthquake happened in Haiti, the United Nations appointed William Jefferson Clinton, almost like the Governor General of Haiti. And he went to Haiti together with another gentleman called O'Brien of Digicel, and they announced that they were going in Haiti to build back better. There was a recent hurricane in Dominica in 2017. And this same gentleman came to Dominica and they said they are going to build back better. And then this gentleman who is in the contention for the seat of the presidency of the United States of America, Mr. Joseph Biden, also announced that he is the president-elect and that they are going to build back better. Could you also comment on that, build back better for us, because I find as though it is coming from sources that are not trusted. Thank you very much for your presentation, and we look forward one of these days for you to come to Dominica. But we want to continue this kind of dialogue because there's a lot more information that we can get from you and learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I so appreciate.
Yeah, if you can just respond to his question in 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and so much for you, Lloyd, Pascal, for being part of the Free Haiti movement and our newsletter since 2004. That's just so wonderful. You see, Fidel Castro, you mentioned him. He studied the Haitian Revolution in the Battle of Vertieres, and he understood to take out all of the economic elites. They all went to Miami. If he had left them in Cuba, Castro would have been assassinated, and there would not, and the same thing that had happened to Desalin would have happened to Castro. It is because he let them immigrate out of his way that you still have the Cuban Revolution going on. Perfect example. Thank you. With regards to the United Nations, obviously, we are not in power in terms of Black people in the world because that's 5 Eurasian nations having veto power over 194 nations, not Janjak Desalin's or our idea of equality and democracy. And yes, you are right. I spent a lot of my time representing Haitian children and Haitian children who've been hurt by UN soldiers. They call them the minister babies. There's a petition out there, the Haiti petition. You guys can go ahead and sign it. Obviously, the law and government controls the narrative. And so that's why they keep telling you to come for civil rights to them, because they control the narrative. And so we're not going to get any equality or justice from the UN or any of the Bretton Woods organizations. With respect to CARICOM Solidarity, it's just like the OAS. These are organizations made not about agitation, but assimilation. And you can't have revolution with assimilation with injustice.
Okay, thank you very much. I would now like to invite Dr. Damian Dublin, chairperson of the Dominica Reparations.
Oh, I'm sorry. He mentioned Build Back Better. I'm sorry. Yes, Biden today, I have this right here. It's the exact same thing. You see, you said that doing the, excuse me, I just want to do this very quickly. You see, after the earthquake in 2010, Bill Clinton, who is kind of the template of Sonthonax. Remember, Sonthonax came, even though they had executed Oge, the mulatto, because he wanted to maintain slavery, but he wanted to have civil rights. He wanted to have the right to vote. They had killed him. When Sonthonax came, he gave the right to vote to all mulattoes. This is the same thing that Build Back Better is about. And this is what Biden is about. These are what progressive Black white folks are about. Progressive Black white folks. They are the mediators, like Kwame Ture says, between our fight, the fight of the Black masses, against white supremacy. And they come in with some assimilated Blacks, like right now we've got Kamala Harris. I have all this information on my website right now, so you guys can see it, so you can see the template very, very, very quickly. And so they're always building back better, but they are incapable of building back better. And the Haitian, after the earthquake, Bill Clinton and Mrs. Clinton and Obama at the White House raised $21 billion. And then they left us with cholera, which has killed almost 30,000 Haitians. And so those who are part of the system cannot destroy the system. They can only prolong it. So it's just a difference between the wolves and, oh my goodness, I just went blank. A wolf or a
fox. Thank you.
So you either want to the foxy, the fox or the wolf, right? So the white liberals, as many revolutionaries have said, even Dr. King said it, are foxes, right? They will give you like very nice teeth and smile in your face like Biden and like Mr. Clinton, but they will raise all this money and then they will invest it in their own Clinton Foundation, and nothing will be left in terms of structure or Built Back Better, whether it's in Haiti, whether it was during the tsunami before that, or whether it's in this current space. So we have to understand this important lesson of the Haitian Revolution. Sonthonax is only about maintaining his system, just like the progressive Blacks. They cannot provide liberation, only civil rights within their system. And as I said, remember, in the United States, the 13th Amendment still makes slavery legal. So they can just put all the Black folks they don't like who are confronting the system into that slavery of the industrial complex, which the 1994 crime bill, which was written by Biden. Thank you very much.